when you think creatively, it doesn't mean that you are neglecting your past or forgetting about what you did. Is how can you creatively reposition your past so that you can step into a new world in your career?
Hello, welcome to CAREER22, a series of videos about the skills we need for a career in the 22nd century. My name is Miguel.
And I am Milton.
And we are both founders of Ungap Education and also both university professors. And after several years teaching and mentoring our students on how to kickstart their careers, we realized that this is one of the most critical and stressful moments in their lives, the career start. And that's why we decided to bring you our learnings about how to start a career in these short videos. So what is our topic for today, Milton?
So today we're talking about this idea of ingenuity and inventiveness and the importance of being creative in approaching your career and in approaching opportunities that come along your career path in a creative way. So we'll be talking about that and sharing some examples with you.
Okay, so what do you mean by inventiveness and ingenuity?
Now, one of the things we see out there in working with the students, and not only with students, but also people later in their careers, is that they are often overly constrained and restrained within sort of their ideas about what they should be doing in their careers, and very much conditioned by their past, by their studies, by their field of expertise, and often not being able to think creatively about possibilities, sometimes right in front of their eyes, right? And this, what we would like to highlight here today is that you don't have to be overly complex and complicated when thinking of new alternatives for your career, and we would like to share some insights about that.
So it's about unleashing your creativity and, and looking at more stuff and thinking about it harder in order to actually build new perspectives and new alternatives and new possibilities and kind of, create inventive solutions for the challenges ahead, which in this day-to-day, context is even more needed because everything is changing so fast that creativity becomes even more strategic, right? So let's try to give some examples. Of course, in the career scope, how can creativity be critical for your career?
So one of the things that I'd like to share, if you want, is maybe my own career in a way, or some aspects of my career. If I look at where I am today, holding this conversation with you, and the stuff that I do, and if I look back to where I was when I started, I would challenge people to see whether there's any sort of connection or relation. So when you look at that gap between where I was maybe 25 years ago and where I am today, it doesn't look very logical, right? But in actual fact, every time I made a career step, there was a logic behind it. And I think my takeaway, my personal takeaway, if you want, and people, of course, can use it if they want, is that every time I wanted to move in a certain direction, I always try to see how can I connect what I do and what I did with the new step that I'm trying to make. So, for instance, when I moved from an engineering job towards a marketing job, I thought, which type of marketing could make use of the skills and the knowledge that I have? Well, I ended up in product management within the company that I was working for. And then I wanted to go into consulting. And then I always thought, okay, if I want to step into consulting, how can I move into that world in a way that is logical based on the things that I've done before? And the angle I took is innovation, because I work in R&D and I had a good insight about the R&D process in a company. So I thought if I approach consulting firms with an angle of innovation, I'll have a better chance. And so it happened. So I ended up working on innovation. But of course, once you are working in a consulting firm, you start dealing with organizational aspects and culture, and then the step towards leadership became quite logical. So every time there was a logic behind it, where I try to connect the past and creatively think of how can I use that in this new context. But if you look at the larger picture, it looks a bit strange. So I have a bit of a rainbow path, if you want. But every time there was a logic behind it, how can I make use of where I am today to step into a world that I would like to be in? So when you think creatively, it doesn't mean that you are neglecting your past or forgetting about what you did. It's how can you creatively reposition your past so that you can step into a new world in your career. So that's what that worked for me, and I would challenge people to think in the same way.
So great example on a creative way of seeing yourself and seeing your value and into the market, right? I also would like to bring an example. A manager I was actually mentoring about his career. He was working in marketing and sales for a couple of years, and he wanted to change. And he had a passion, and the passion was blockchain. He was starting the blockchain movement all over the globe, but it was really, ambitious in thinking that blockchain will change the world, and I want to be there, and I want to lead somehow. But every single blockchain job opportunity he was applying, rejected him because he didn't have the skills, the technical skills, or the curriculum to actually be one of the shortlist candidates. So he decided, I have to crack this case. So he found a very creative way on how to approach the market. And what he did was actually he started writing. So he created this blog that initially was basically reposting or mentioning and doing reports on others people thinking and writing. And then suddenly he also started writing and studying a lot and building his own authority and credibility. And eventually, by becoming a prominent blogger, one of the references, he was started being invited as a speaker, and suddenly, he was already with a curriculum that was lacking before. And now he has a blockchain studio that does work for big companies, and actually is also working as a blockchain specialist advisor in a blockchain startup that just raised millions of funding. So it's a great way on how to crack and find a creative way of leveraging your career as well. Another example on the same page, very young student of mine wanted to work in an area that he didn't study. So he had this problem, I made a mistake. I studied this course because my father and mother wanted me to study, and now I'm stuck with this, dilemma, which is I can never, be where I want to be because of my diploma, and suddenly what we discussed, and it was a great idea, a creative idea on how to crack this as well, was why don't you build your network in that industry that you wanna jump in. And by building your network, probably you will have more opportunities coming to you, rather than sending a CV to an inbox that nobody reads. And then and suddenly he said, I want to accelerate my networking. So he created this event as a very niche event for that specific industry. He was very ambitious on the level of guest speakers he invited. And suddenly, that event brought him the best network that he could have on that specific area. He also built curriculum and credibility because it was you managed to put up a very interesting event for that particular niche. I'm not talking about a full house in a big venue, but I'm talking a small event, but very, very niche with the people that really interested. And he got 3 job offers, not 1, not 2, but 3 job offers after the event. He was very early on, so he didn't have the course finished. I think currently he's now working in that industry. He's one of the managers. He's not working in London, but he never finished. He never graduated because the job offers, were really interesting, and he just jumped into the job market with that creative approach. So I think they're good examples on how inventiveness and and finding creative ways to do it. So let's try to give also some tips and some practical hacks. How can we build our creativity and inventiveness skills?
Yeah, one thing that I would like to suggest is that we look creatively at our identity, and I think identity plays an important role in our lives because we want to attach ourselves to some values and principles and symbols that are important. And of course, our degree in a way also shapes our identity, right? So for instance, I studied engineering, but I work mainly on things that have to do with maybe psychology and sociology, right? So who am I at the end of the day, right? A good example of a friend of mine that I worked with while we were doing our MBA, he studied history and he was working in investment banking. So is he an historian or is he a banker, right? But my call here would be try to be creative also about your identity. And identity is a very malleable concept. You don't have to stick to the idea that I studied finance, so I'm going to be a financial expert. I studied engineering, so I'll be an engineer all my life, and that's what defines me. So yes and no at the same time, because from that identity, you can develop other identities that are combinations of other things. From history, probably the best example you can think is Benjamin Franklin, right? One of the founding fathers of the United States of America, and yet he was an inventor, a scientist, a philosopher, a publisher. And if you would ask him, who are you? I don't know if you would have an easy answer. So don't be so fixed on that idea of identity. It's important that you are principled and you understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, be flexible and see that as a malleable thing that you are constructing as you progress. That would be my first tip.
Great one. I think also my tip would be rather than thinking with with a crowd. So many times we are just doing the same things and looking at the same things as everybody else. Try to look at more stuff. And I think seeking inspiration, not like a lightning bolt or epiphany, but seeking strategic inspiration for the challenge that you have in your hands is a critical step. For me, looking at who else already done similar stuff can be a very powerful new dot creation skill or new dot creation hack, because sometimes you see in other industry, in another context, something that is very powerful, and then you can actually bring to your own reality and and steal with style, like as I like to call it. It's not copying, but stealing with style. And I think that's a great tip for being creative. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you have to actually get wheels from other contexts and come up with a new perspective on your own. Any more tips that you think of?
Yeah, I would like to add, I think it comes in line with what you're saying. Is my tip would be also to build some sort of discipline in being undisciplined. So a good example could be, I commit myself to every month to go to an event or a conference or a movie that I would normally not attend or watch, right? So something unusual and different from what you normally would do. Maybe even something you dislike, for the simple aspect of stimulating your creativity and your curiosity about things that are unusual for you. If you can build that discipline, it is maybe not so complicated. That alone can trigger new thoughts, new ideas, and trigger your imagination and maybe some inspiration. So build that discipline of being a bit undisciplined also in your life. Every now and then do something that you would normally not do and see what happens. And of course, you need to have a mindset of curiosity and openness towards that. And let that, sink in and integrate into your thinking, and let that kind of inspire you into doing other things.
Yeah, in pursuing a career or trying to find a meaningful career for your path, strategic curiosity didn't kill the cat. If you find, the intentional curiosity and serendipity in order to find the right, angle to exploring your career, can bring you a lot of benefits. Great. Another example I have is actually, try to have a more heterogeneous network. So I see many people that have a network which is composed by very similar profiles of people. And by assuming that your network influences a lot who you are and what you do, if you have people that are very similar, I think they will not be very creative. I think it's consensus working for you and in a day-to-day basis. Now, if you have a more different and dispersed network, probably you will be challenged to think differently and adapt to different kinds of thinking.
Yeah.
And it will develop for sure your creativity and imagination and inventiveness. And if you apply that to your career, it's even more powerful, because your network will shape a lot your ability to find those hidden job opportunities, right?
If you allow me there, I think there's one important, maybe more theoretical aspect or empirical aspect that we know from research that contributes to that. There's a lot of studies out there on social network analysis. And there's a very important distinction between what we call strong ties and weak ties. And what we know is that actually strong ties might be very important when you're needing help for something, right? So people can help you, they trust you, they know you well, and they can maybe give a recommendation letter or sponsor you somehow in a particular new path. But the importance of weak ties gets often neglected. And I think comes back to what you're saying. Those weak ties might not be so strong, of course, as we discussed in some cases, but they are critical for you to spot new opportunities. So a good network is a combination of strong ties and weak ties. And these weak ties can be dispersed and very diverse. And that will give you an opportunity to spot new chances, new venues, new possibilities that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do. So it's a very important aspect of building an effective network for your career.
Yeah, my final tip for inventiveness and ingenuity applied to career will be a more polemic one, which is, do the opposite. Whenever you're planning or structuring something that you are doing, in order to pursue your career development, do the opposite. Try to find, when everybody zigs, try to zag. We already said it, many times. But if you, do the opposite many times, I think it will bring you much more benefits than risks. And I think you'll be challenging yourself to at least, think about different approaches to your life and career. So any final thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I think it's daring not to conform, right? And I think it condenses some of the things we've been saying here. When you find yourself conforming too much to reality, push yourself to go for the unusual and to get out there and try different things, talk to different people, experiment with the unusual. And I think that will do a lot for your career.
Great. Great to create this inventiveness and and different approach for the career crafters that we have, and and see you soon, Milton, for another session of Career 22. Thank you
Cheers.
very much.
Bye.
Bye bye. Cheers.